The heavy plastic handle of the ice-filled cooler was digging painfully into Harrison's calloused palm, but the physical ache was nothing compared to the crushing weight in his chest, believing he was an unwanted intruder at the very gathering where he had once dreamed of belonging. He had spent 5 long, agonizing years convincing himself that Rebecca had moved on, completely erasing him from her memory after a devastating misunderstanding left his world shattered into pieces. Standing at the edge of her family's brightly lit suburban backyard under the radiant afternoon sun, watching her talk to old friends in her sunlit floral dress, Harrison felt like a ghost haunting a life he was never meant to share. But as he took a hesitant step forward, terrified of ruining her happiness, Rebecca's mother stepped away from the crowd, wrapped her arms around him in a tight, maternal hug, and whispered words that shattered every belief he had carried in his heart for half a decade. Before we continue this emotional journey of healing and second chances, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and the power of love to heal deep wounds, please take a brief moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our community grow and allows us to keep sharing stories that touch the heart and remind us all that it is never too late to repair what was broken. Harrison and Rebecca had grown up in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, inseparable since their early high school days. Harrison was a humble, hardworking young man who spent his youth learning the art of custom woodworking, finding peace in the smell of fresh cedar and the honest labor of creating things with his own hands. Rebecca was the daughter of Arthur and Corinne, a warmth-filled home where open doors, Sunday dinners, and laughter were the foundation of everyday life. From the moment Harrison was old enough to understand what love meant, he knew that Rebecca was the center of his world. Her vibrant laugh, her unwavering empathy, and her soft, perceptive eyes made him feel seen in a world where he had always felt quiet and overlooked. Yet, deep down, Harrison carried a persistent, quiet insecurity, constantly fearing that a simple craftsman like him would never be able to offer Rebecca the luxurious, effortless life her family deserved. 5 years ago, tragedy struck in a way that turned Harrison's quiet fears into a devastating reality. A sudden electrical fire destroyed his small workshop, burning down his tools, his inventory, and every bit of savings he had poured into his dream. Overwhelmed by debt, shame, and a toxic sense of inadequacy, Harrison convinced himself that staying in Rebecca's life would only pull her down into his ruin. To make matters worse, a well-meaning relative had quietly offered him an apprenticeship and financial recovery package in a city hours away, explicitly suggesting that stepping back would allow Rebecca to pursue her higher education without distraction. Blinded by pride and broken pride, Harrison packed his remaining belongings and left Willow Creek without saying goodbye in person, leaving behind a long, heartfelt letter explaining his pain. But through a cruel twist of fate, that letter was accidentally misplaced and never reached Rebecca's hands. For 5 excruciating years, both of them lived in the shadow of that silent departure. Rebecca believed that Harrison had simply abandoned her without an explanation, discarding years of shared dreams as if they meant nothing at all. Her heart hardened into a protective shell, though she never truly gave herself to anyone else, throwing all her energy into her career as a pediatric counselor. On the other side of the state, Harrison worked tireless 16-hour days, rebuilding his workshop, paying off every cent of his debt, and slowly establishing himself as a respected artisan. Yet, despite his financial success, his soul remained entirely empty. Every piece of furniture he crafted, every wooden ring he carved in his spare time, was made with Rebecca in mind. He had convinced himself that she probably hated him, or worse, that she had forgotten him entirely and built a beautiful life with someone far more worthy. The turning point came on a clear, warm July afternoon when a mutual friend mentioned that Corinne and Arthur were hosting their annual midsummer community barbecue. Something inside Harrison, a quiet spark of desperation that had been dormant for half a decade, suddenly ignited. He realized that living with the fear of her rejection was far more painful than facing her and offering the honest, humble apology he should have delivered 5 years earlier. He did not expect her forgiveness, nor did he expect her to fall into his arms. He simply wanted to stand before her as a man who had taken responsibility for his cowardice. He bought a large, sturdy blue cooler, filled it with ice and cold drinks to serve as a modest offering, and drove back toward the place where his heart had stayed behind. When Harrison arrived at the house, the sun was sitting high in a cloudless blue sky, casting a warm golden glow over the green lawn, the checkered picnic tables, and the string of colorful paper lanterns hanging between the trees. The back garden was alive with the ambient sounds of clinking glasses, children playing near the flower beds, and the delicious scent of grilled food drifting through the summer air. Harrison stood near the fence line, holding the heavy cooler in front of him like a shield, feeling immensely out of place in his simple navy t-shirt and dark jeans. Across the lawn, standing by the table, was Rebecca. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, her curly dark hair swept up in a loose bun, holding a glass of iced tea. When her eyes swept past the gate and locked onto Harrison, the world seemed to freeze. Shock, confusion, and an indescribable wave of emotion washed across her face, sending a violent jolt of anxiety straight through Harrison's chest. Before Harrison could turn around and retreat out of pure panic, Corinne spotted him from across the yard. The middle-aged woman immediately set down her serving tray and walked over with a gentle, glowing expression that lacked even a trace of anger. When she reached Harrison, she did not ask why he had stayed away for 5 years, nor did she scold him for the pain he had caused. Instead, she took the heavy cooler from his trembling hands, set it onto the grass, and pulled him into a warm, forgiving embrace that smelled comforting and familiar. As she held him, she leaned in close to his ear and softly spoke the words that would change everything, telling him that Rebecca had never cleared his pictures from her private photo albums, and that even to this day, whenever she absent-mindedly doodled on her notepad while sitting at her desk, she was still practicing writing her name with his last name attached, waiting for the day he would finally come home to explain. Those words hit Harrison like a wave of pure sunlight breaking through a dark storm. The heavy armor of guilt, shame, and assumption that he had carried for 5 agonizing years melted away in a single instant, replaced by an overwhelming clarity. He looked into Corinne's kind, encouraging eyes, and she gave him a subtle nod, pointing toward the wooden bench near the back garden wall where Rebecca had walked to be alone, trying to process the overwhelming sight of him standing in her yard. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Harrison walked across the lush lawn, the midday sun warming his shoulders, feeling for the first time in 5 years that he was walking toward his real purpose instead of running away from his fears. Sitting down on the wooden bench beside Rebecca under the shade of a towering maple tree, Harrison listened to the rustle of the leaves above them in the gentle summer breeze. For several minutes, neither of them spoke, the emotional weight of half a decade hanging quietly in the air between them. When Harrison finally began to speak, his voice was thick with emotion, but completely steady and honest. He told her everything, about the fire that had broken his spirit, the overwhelming sense of unworthiness that had blinded his judgment, the misguided advice he had listened to, and the lost letter that was supposed to explain his heart. He did not offer excuses, he offered his raw, unvarnished truth, admitting that leaving was the greatest mistake of his life and that not a single day had passed where he hadn't carried her in his thoughts. Rebecca sat silently, tears brimming in her eyes and glistening under the bright sunlight, as she listened to the story she had waited 5 long years to hear. The resentment and anger that had guarded her heart for so long slowly gave way to a profound sense of relief. She realized that the man she had loved had never truly stopped loving her, that his absence was driven by misplaced protection and foolish pride rather than lack of care. Reaching into her small shoulder bag, she pulled out a small, polished wooden keepsake, an intricate rose he had hand-carved for her on their 2nd anniversary, and showed him that she had carried it with her every single day. She admitted that while the years apart had been painful, knowing the truth healed the deepest wound she had carried. As the sun continued to shine brightly over the celebration, Arthur walked over to the bench, looking down at Harrison with a stern yet respectful expression. After a long moment of quiet observation, the older man extended his hand, pulling Harrison up into a firm, supportive handshake, welcoming him back into the circle of their family. Neighbors and friends laughed and conversed in the background under the clear blue sky, but for Harrison and Rebecca, the world had transformed into a place of new beginnings. Sitting together on the bench, hand in hand with the warm sunlight filtering through the trees, they both understood that the past could not be changed, but the future was entirely theirs to build. Before we conclude this touching story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to find the courage to ask for a second chance, or forgiven someone who lost their way? We would love to hear your story. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Harrison learned that true love does not require perfection, nor does it demand that a person never falter. Rather, it requires the humility to face one's mistakes, the courage to seek forgiveness, and the faith to believe in second chances. The heavy cooler he had carried across the lawn that afternoon was no longer a symbol of his burden, but the very key that reopened the door to the life, the home, and the love he had almost lost forever.